Yep, it says we're live.
Awesome.
All right, everybody. All right. Welcome to episode 2 of Thoughts from, no.
Episode 2, season 2. That's right. The Musty Wargamers, season 2.
I'm about ready to go into my spew with thoughts from the inner sphere.
That's right. Thoughts from the inner sphere.
Welcome, Mech Warriors. Watch. All right. So, yeah, that's another good night. We're back. We had some good topics tonight. And we were just talking about, before we get started into our topics, what's going on around here. And you were showing off your new little device. Now, you had a little in your last video, was it yesterday?
Yes.
Or was that Tuesday? I can't remember.
Maybe it was Tuesday. I thought it was yesterday.
Could have been.
But I don't even know anymore.
I've been running around so much. It's like I haven't been home much in the last couple of days. But so other than that, it's like I think this is Thursday, right?
It is. That part I'm sure of.
Right. So,
if it's Musty Wargamers and it's Thursday.
We haven't even started drinking yet. We're all messed up.
That's right.
Yeah, we were just talking about what your 3D printer there. And
yes.
I was like looking at that, and we're just talking about, he was showing it, and I was just telling him about if anybody out there plays World of Warships, and they had this a couple years ago. They had the bathtub mode where you're fighting inside a big giant bathtub. And you had these little floaty boats like you would see in a bathtub, and little rubber duckies sitting there floating around. And you were shooting little torpedoes at each other. It was kind of cool. I kind of hooked on it because it was so stupid. It was fun.
Stupid, it's funny. Yeah. Well, I guess the reason I printed that thing off was mainly just because it's a bit of a benchmark print, but I guess we can find a reason in working to use it. So
where there's a will, there's a way.
That's right.
I was always been saying, it's like I've been wanting to get a 3D printer for the longest time because I just wanted, like you want to do is start printing off all kinds of terrain and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have some stuff I started painting, but I just never finished it. Where's it at? Move my... Hi, everybody. Get the close-up of my face. And it's like I got this big bag of... It's nothing but 3D printed stuff that I picked up off eBay. Somebody was selling it for like $20 for all this big giant bag of stuff.
Oh, wow.
And... I think what it was all kinds of stuff that they were, not really sure it came out the way they wanted to.
Okay.
And you can see it was like inside of it, how it came out.
Mm-hmm.
And all I got was primed most of it. Some of it I started painting or I painted up pretty decent. And you can see like that right there.
Yeah.
Looks pretty decent.
Yeah, it does.
And,
is that like a Napoleonic building, like LaSalle?
Yeah, it would work for like 6mm Napoleonics or BattleTech.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, this came out, looks pretty decent. You can see inside where you got the little lines and stuff, especially where the roofs are.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing underneath when it's going across.
Right.
It's kind of like a little, I guess it's like little, strands going across it, like fishing, like I would always equate it to a monofilament line or something.
Yep.
But I picked that up and I was like, yeah, that's going to be fine if I ever get ambitious enough to ever finish painting it all.
So what is your Musty drink tonight for our discussion?
Well, where is that? I had it in my face here. It's Glenmorangie 12-year-old.
There you go. Very nice.
Brought it down from upstairs.
You have anything on the painting table at the moment?
Well,
anything in particular?
Yes, I am. I have finished something that a video went out. Well, it's probably uploading right now. There we go.
Oh, sweet. I haven't seen it in this progress, but you showed it to me in the beginnings.
Yes.
Oh, wow. That is so awesome.
the video is going to be uploaded here sooner or later. I started uploading about an hour ago. It's on my phone, so it's going cellular.
Yeah, yeah.
And remember, Russ, cool. I was telling you about that little guy in the back that, you know, that he's hacking his way out of the. Well, there it is.
There he is.
That is. He's chopped his way out of the coffin.
That's a nice touch.
And I did some green stuff. I made some cloth green stuff right here. So it's kind of like a flap down. So he's got his hand up and he's pushing it up. And he's like, I'm coming out.
That's a really nice touch, having the guy coming out of the coffin.
Yeah. So it's like, otherwise the model, it's a decent model. And I just wanted to add a little bit of flair to it. And then I got my little skeleton rats I had from a different kit added there. So I still got some other skeletons I've yet finished. I could glue them on here. I was like a couple skeletons walking along behind it.
That would be cool.
Yeah. So I was thinking about doing that too. Just add a little bit of flair, like a caravan of undead from the Night Haunt army.
Yeah. Neat.
And then I started this not too long ago.
Right.
That is
very cool.
That is the Morngol from Forge World.
That's ghastly.
Yes, my son ordered this thing, and I've got the paint on it. The light here is not doing so great. You probably see it better in the update video I just did.
Okay.
It's kind of a bluish green color. Here in this light, it's looking blue, but it has a little green tint to it.
Cool.
So, you know, he's got the ripping the horse apart. You know, you can see the guts of the horse ripped out.
That's awesome.
And then I finished this guy.
Oh, there you go. Carandrus, right?
Carandrus, yeah.
Yeah.
Got him all finished up.
Awesome.
Obviously, the light here's not that great, but if you follow me on Instagram.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you can see it.
You see a picture of both the miniatures up on Instagram. So,
and then your video's uploading for the other ones, right?
Yeah. So eventually, maybe tonight, heck, this video might be up before the other one's out. So other than that, that's pretty much what I've been working on here. The Rangers are in a state of brown. I got the base brown on them, and then now I'm going to go through and start picking the details, and I got to go through and give them their green, like camo cloaks, and probably some like black boots or something, you know, something like that.
Nice.
So that will finish up what's left of the Old Hammer Pain Challenge for that. And then I'll move on. I have the... you know, sitting right here is I will not get to the Avatar probably because I'm moving on to other projects.
Yep. Well, you've done a lot. You've done more than I have.
Yeah. So that's what, you know, I just have the itch to get into something, you know. October is either October or Spooktober.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I always like to put something out in those 2 months to either Halloween. Right now, Halloween and demons or stuff are screaming at me. So that's what I plan to do.
Cool.
Now, what's going on in your end of the woods there?
On my end of the woods, well, tonight I am drinking a cold Coors Light. No true musty drink tonight. I'm drinking a nice ice cold beer.
So you're drinking water.
It's my house. All that. That's my house beer, my refreshing ice cold drink.
Go with all the snow you have up there.
That's right. That's right. We got like roughly 2 feet of snow on Tuesday, and kind of, despite the fact that we're quite used to snow here, we weren't expecting it this soon and that much at once. So it kind of paralyzed us for a day. But then because the ground is kind of still warm from the summer and it's not really gotten cold up here for a prolonged period, it's already melting and stuff. So it's not too bad. But it was kind of crazy because I had to that day change my tires over and stuff. But I've finished. I put up that video recently, and I finished my second squad with the Farseer of the Musty Challenge, the Eldar Space Elves. And so those are there, and I've started on the dreadnoughts. What I was going to show today, because the dreadnoughts are upstairs on my painting tray, and I've only really just working on the base paint, just starting on some of the details. I was just going to quickly show what Rusty and I were talking about here, and that's some of the 3D printing stuff. I actually have something hobby related for it, because I just did my first piece related to the hobby. But what I started the day with, I showed this on the channel, that I did this boat that we were just talking about. And this is the one that I showed right here. And just going to put this on the big screen so I can see it here, what you guys are seeing. Yeah. So I had this here. And because it's white, it is hard to see some of the details, but hopefully with the shadows, you can see some of them there. But what I actually did today was this one. And if you look at the top, here, having my spatial issues. It's probably because they're actually turned different ways here. Let me turn them the same way. There we go. If you look at the top of this one here, it's actually... It has ridges, but it's the same exact print.
Yeah.
But it actually has ridges that are actually much finer. It's much smoother on the top. And I don't know how easy it is to see that.
Try cutting off some of the light and put a shadow across it.
Sure. Let me just turn this off. So, yeah. So there... I don't know how easy to see. It is white.
You just barely see the lines there.
Yeah. But now with this one here, there was some definite markings, like some imperfections in that spot right there. And when I did this one, there's a visible, there's a barely visible faint darkness right there, spotting, but when you touch it, it's completely smooth. So like if you were to paint it, you wouldn't actually have it at all. So the quality, even on the sides, is significantly smoother on the one. It took twice as long to do it the higher quality. So this one, I am happy with it. I mean, I've not cleaned it up yet. It has some imperfections in the print, but overall, it's actually, in my mind, pretty good. I'm actually pretty happy with it. Now, sorry, you're gonna say something, Rusty?
Yeah. Is the resin like a reservoir of liquid resin, or is it like a spool of resin?
So it's not what typically is referred to as resin in this. It's not it's not even a resin printer. There are resin printers for 3D printing, and that's why I make that distinction. I can use a variety of materials. This is called PLA, and it's the most common material that you typically will use with these printers. It's sort of entry level. It works really well. It's one of the easier ones to work with. There are other ones like ABS, which you might be familiar with, like is in like HVAC a lot and stuff, like the black piping. ABS it's like a very similar chemical to that. And there are people that use other kinds of filaments, even soft filaments that actually are flexible. Like there's lots. My printer can use lots of things, but it can't actually, to my knowledge, use actual resin. It's not a resin printer. So this is a hard plastic. It would be it's much harder than what I think of when I think of the resins that we typically have in our hobby. It's probably really good for terrain. Listening to some people that are into the miniature hobby and 3D printing, they tend to prefer this for terrain and sometimes the resin printers for miniatures, like actual miniatures. You can use this material for miniatures too, but some of the resin printers, I think you can get a higher level of detail.
Yeah.
Moving on though, just to get to the hobby piece, I did actually, now this is not my thing that I printed. This is a Warhound for Epic.
Yeah.
But I have this that I printed, and it is
a building.
A
Gothic.
Yeah, Gothic style building. Yeah, let me pull back a little bit here. So actually, this is like a little Epic Warhound. These are some Epic Marines. And sorry about that. And these are, this is a building that I just printed. Literally, I took this off about 5 minutes before I started talking to you. I haven't even really cleaned it up. I noticed there's one little piece right there that in that archway that I got to just take a little hobby knife to, little frilly piece. But to be honest, it's like that on all sides, but this it has a door on that side.
Yeah.
And
how long did that take?
This took 5 hours.
All right. Is that low quality or medium?
This is a high quality print.
Okay.
This is a high quality print. And so, you know, it is based on the file and how you do it, and I'm new at it. I'm actually quite happy with this, to be honest. I don't really have much of an issue with it. It came out actually very much to my satisfaction. I use the machine setting. I mean, the settings for the program and the machine that are considered high quality. You can tweak them and do things at times that will actually, for your purposes, come out with a better result than the standard high quality. But actually, with the standard settings, I'm actually really pleased with this. So, yeah,
I could see you in a course of a week have yourself a little set of terrain for Epic.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, let's switch cameras back here. I'm actually having fun with it. I mean, there's just a lot of opportunity. I'm going to do a video showing some more stuff, and as I get more experience with it and giving my thoughts on the 3D printing, but yeah, that is sort of, I've been mixing in doing the Musty challenge this week. This just came on Monday. So actually it's funny. Like I just got a box at the end of the day on Monday when I got home from work. That was on my Stoop, the 3D printer. I had it assembled Monday evening. I assembled it, and between Monday evening, the snowstorm on Tuesday, and this morning, you know, that's kind of I've already gotten my first hobby piece going. So I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I say that's moving along pretty good there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's you know, I think it's pretty decent quality, to be honest. I mean, it'll be easier to see when it's painted.
Is that a Reaver Titan back there?
You have an eagle eye. Hang on a second, because I've learned I can't easily do this without switching to my other camera. I'm not sure if you were looking at that one, the black one.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I also got this guy.
Oh yeah, you got the Warlord.
Yeah, and then even though I'm not doing Eldar at the moment, I've got this guy.
Yeah, you got that's the Phantom
yeah.
Titan.
Yeah, that's right. it's lots of Titans.
Yeah, tomorrow we're supposed to be doing a 2,500 point battle. It's going to be, I guess I'm taking on Zinch.
Oh,
tomorrow.
That'll be cool.
Yeah.
So I'm not familiar because I've not played enough Epic yet. I'm not familiar what kind of chaos powers come into play with Zinch. Is it just that you face the Zinch little demons and stuff, or do you actually, is there like Lord of Change spells that will come after you?
Oh, they have, well, there's there is a Lord of Change. You have all the different factions. You know, you can have Marines, you'll have disc riders. You know, they'll basically shooting off like little chaos bolts. You know,
you'll definitely have Thousand Suns then if you're going against Siege, right?
Yes.
In Epic, definitely. I mean, you got to have the Thousand Suns.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, it looks like Zinch has arrived.
Yeah, like sneaking up on me here. What's going on?
So cool. Well, shall we get on to our topics?
Well, we have the two topics. You want to do the working? All right, we got the two topics tonight. Are the looking at different systems with using different kinds of dice, and then we're going to go into the painting for pleasure or just gaming, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
So should we just kick off with the working with the systems, dice systems?
Sure,
or?
sure. Do you want me to
Yeah, let's kick
kind
that
of
off.
introduce that? Well, I will. So I thought it'd be interesting to, we were talking about it, and I thought it'd be interesting to have a topic where we just discuss. I'm not a game designer. I know you've designed games, Rusty. I'm not I've played a lot of games and I've kind of recognized some of these things, but I wouldn't consider myself an expert. But with different game systems, they oftentimes will choose different dice mechanics that may incorporate not only mechanics within whatever dice you choose, but also different types of dice. And so you have all your polyhedral dice. A lot of the games, historical in particular, I find use the D6, and a lot of games with Games Workshop use the D6. But we also know, like Infinity will use the D20, and there's lots of other games that use like D10s. And so, and honestly, like we were talking about that Burrows and Badgers game with the animated, the animals, like that are that actually uses all of them. It uses D4 up to D20 in that game, or at least I know D4 to D12, but I believe there might be a reason to use D20 too. And so I thought it'd be interesting just to talk about what we think the benefits are and the reasons for doing that, and some of the advantages that you get when you choose one type of die versus another. And then, to be honest, we could even kind of talk a little bit about dice mechanics and how, if you decide not to use a particular type of die, how there are other things you can do with the dice that you choose that will actually, help compensate for the limitations that you might have with any die you select. And one thing I'll just say, and this is a shout out to Ralph Hasley, is that we had another video recently where we were talking about the idea of how more than one die is called dice. Yes. Do you remember that? And so apparently, depending on where you are in the world, like the actual Oxford official dictionary has actually considered it now that one die, as we would say, can also be called one dice, or to throw a dice can refer to one die. And so even though it's an older use of more original use of the English language to use the term die, that it's now for some time now, and particularly in the UK, commonplace and recognized in the dictionary to use it that way. And so I thought I'd bring it up because you and I were both kind of like, that's ridiculous. Neither of us had heard of that before.
That makes no sense.
So I appreciate Ralph being a gentleman, didn't get upset about that, but you just very gentlemanly pointed that out and gave us the info. And it does seem to be a debated subject online as well, but at the very least in certain places with the official Oxford Dictionary England, it is referred to that way. So since we're talking about dice, I didn't even think of it, but I thought I might as well bring that up to tie into that conversation. So with that said, Rusty, what do you think? What say you?
Well, we jumped into that can of worm of dice versus die. I like to put it out there just before we even get started. No. You can throw a D6 or you can throw a pair of D6, but you can't throw a dice.
Okay.
It's not possible. The English doesn't work for me. Okay. It's like when somebody says, throw some dice. All right, I'll pick up 2 or more because you did not tell me how many to throw. I'm picking a bunch up.
Okay, so for we will. It's to each his own, is what it is.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you ever get into a game with me and then somebody says that, it's like, okay, you asked for it. All right. Yeah, it's a pretty good subject because I was just thinking, just putting through my head because, I've crunched the numbers before. And for those of you that do not know this, let me put on the glass eyes. All right. The variance in rolling a die is if you roll a D4, it's 25% variance, right? With each pip, correct?
Yeah.
A D6 is 16.6. A D8 is 12.5. A D12 is 8.3. A D20 is 5%. And if you roll 2D10, you can get 1 to 100 or 1% variance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're playing a game like Battletech or let's say War Machine, and you roll 2 dice together, there's a 9% variance across your die rolls.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now that is when it comes to creating a dice system is what is your, let's say I'm throwing on my designer hat right now. If you're looking at mechanics and you're trying to figure out how do I want a mechanic to work, and you have to sit down and say, how do I want that mechanic? How much of a variance do I want my mechanic to have? All right. If you have a D6 system, let's say like 40K, Warhammer, a vast majority of dice games out there, you're going to have a D6. Mm-hmm. That's the core of it. And that's fine and dandy, but you know that when you have a D6 system, you're looking at a very kind of large variance, which every time you throw one die. Mm-hmm. And if you want to have lots of modifiers in your game system due to range, unless you want to work that into the mechanic of like open-ended die rolls like Dystopian Wars, if you throw a D6 and you roll a 6, that's an open-ended die roll, so you can take that 6 and roll it again and add the results to the previous results. That kind of opens it up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Now, you remember, I think we talked about playing, what was it? The Iron Crown Enterprise game, Rollmaster.
Yes.
That used the 2D10, where you're getting a percentile. That right. was all based on a percentile system. D&D, which I started off in, uses a D20, D4 through D20, and your to hit rolls and all your reaction rolls and stuff like that are all based on a D20, which is a 5 percentile system. And you can have so much of a large variance in helping with modifiers. So that gives you a larger range when you're playing a game. And I'm a big fan of the D20, just to put that out there, mm-hmm. or a D10. Mm-hmm. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of newer games, like Infinity uses a D20. Right. We were playing Frostgrave that uses a D20, which is kind of nice because you have a large variance in how you do stuff. Right. Let's see, what is it here? Well, we won't talk about Malifaux because obviously we know that's a card game. But all right, here we go. Here's the one that goes back in the archives. Dirtside.
Okay.
All right. Dirtside and Star Grunt, which is another one made by the same company, Ground Zero Games. It uses a D4, D6, D8, D12. All right. And with that game system it depends on either range, the farther out the target is, it will affect what die you roll. If you're going to roll, if it's extreme range, you might have to roll a D4, or the closer you get, you're going to use a D12, and that's more firepower the larger die you have. Right. All right.
So it's using the die rather than variance in the sense of opportunity within that isolated action. Like it's actually changing the actual action by giving you a different die, so it's more opportunity, or less opportunity. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So what you have is like you can only hit on a 4+ with a D4 versus hitting on with a 5+ with a D12.
Yeah, yeah.
So you have a 25% versus larger percentage with the D12.
Right.
And it was a very interesting way of doing things, and also is that you're rolling off with each other. Let's say you have a green infantry would use a D4 to hit with.
Right.
You're opposite rolling against each other, and the other guy, he may be elite, he's using a D12.
Right. Right.
So the best the green troops ever going to roll is a 4, and the other guys are going to be rolling 12s possibly. So
right.
Or
right.
or they may be using a D6 versus your D4. So the odds are that your guy with the D6 is going to overcome the guy with the D4.
So, in kind of just summarize some of the stuff you said to this point, from what I've heard so far, I believe is that not only by going from one die to the next do you actually have different kinds of variants, and you mentioned modifiers, and it also leaves room for potentially more modifiers if you have more room for variants, in the sense that, you know, it doesn't make it's probably harder if you're working on D4s to have lots of modifiers, because right off the bat you could get into the negatives, you know, very quickly, or, you know, you can get into a situation that doesn't work, you know, if you have a die, if you're using a really low die. Whereas let's say you use the D20, there's lots of room for -1 and +1 modifiers within there, just because you're already dealing on a system of 20 pips, you know.
Yes.
And so, but also you mentioned how you can switch dice within the rule sets and use more than one kind of die for different kinds of opportunity. And so, just like in the game I mentioned before with the burrows and badgers, like larger animals might have larger dice and smaller animals might have smaller dice, and that's going to affect the game. And then also, like you mentioned, you could be playing a game where range allows a different type of die versus another range, to reflect either closeness and and accuracy and things like that. I'm assuming, you know, there's just opportunity in that regard.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're dealing with a different kinds of systems, you're kind of limiting yourself. If you, to be honest with you, I feel within the confines of, like, say, let's just take 40K for example. It's one of the most popular games out there. Everything is just stuck on a D6 system. You know, when they were saying they're coming out with a totally new system, I was like, all right, is it going to be on a D10? Are they going to move it to a D10? And then we can have, you know, a little bit more modifiers in the game,
right?
Where, you know, you can have elite troops that hit on a D10 that you know, that would have a ballistic skill. Let's say you're looking at like the Primarchs or Chaos Demons or something, that, or some type of Lord that has a ballistic skill of 7, so they will hit on a 3 on a D10, right? And so that gives you a larger variance compared to a lowly infantryman that's running around, that, let's say, a cultist that has a ballistic skill of 3, and he only hits on, you know, a 7+ on a D10. You know?
Right.
So that gives you a large chunk of space that you can work with in a game system.
Right.
And then if you are, let's say, then you can go into, all right, if you beyond, is that your range of your weapon shoots out to 30 inches. If you're 16 to 30, you have a -1 to your ballistic skill. All right. So you can work that in there easily and go back to, remember, if you ever looked at the old Rogue Trader, you know, there's modifiers, and in the 2nd edition we had modifiers and stuff like that. And you could work that in easier with a D10 than you could with a D6 system.
Absolutely, yeah. And you kind of brought up a couple of the things that, like, I was thinking about when thinking about dice. One of the things you mentioned that I didn't bring up was opposed rolls. And opposed rolls versus regular, just rolling. A lot of times in a game you'll roll, like, let's say you roll your leadership, and unless your opponent affects your leadership somehow, like, unless they have some sort of magic ability or something where it affects that, like, most of the time when you roll for your morale or your leadership, it's a non-opposed. But then, like, and, you know, and to hit, it's in many games, like 40K, it's non-opposed. But in some games, it's actually a lot of opposed rolls. And so no matter what kind of die you choose, the opposed roll mechanic can change things in your dice mechanics. I'm guessing that if you don't want to get the same number a lot, then the higher the die, you're ensuring a little more variability in the opposed roll. So if you roll a d6, and there's a good chance, 1 out of 6, that you're going to roll the same number, in which case your opposed roll kind of gets messed up unless there's modifiers in there, which there often is in some of these games with opposed rolls. But if you roll a d4, even more so, like you're going to roll the same number a lot. And so in opposed rolls, it would make sense that, like Infinity uses a lot of opposed rolls, and they use the d20, and it works quite well, in my opinion, in that sense. And so, so it's interesting. The other thing, though, is how 40K a lot of people like to throw a lot of dice, and when you want to throw a mitt full of dice, it's often d6s, and something like 40K, and a lot of people like that. You can still do some things, and there's wiggle room, as I can see it, within games like 40K, where the number of dice you throw is the variant. And so you're limited to d6, but if you're rolling 15 of them, all of a sudden it kind of changes the dynamic of what you're trying to do, rather than just rolling one. You're going to get it's an added bit of variability, not in the die itself. The variance is in the number of dice and all the successes and the failures that add the combined variance. So that's kind of interesting to me. Normally in games that roll d20s, you're not rolling 16 d20s. Like if somebody knows a game where you're rolling like 16 d20s at once, please put it in the comments. I'd love to hear about it, because I've never seen that. There you go. Which one?
They're sitting on the shelf over there. I designed them myself. So
okay, all right. There you go. But you know what I'm saying, though? It's not common, right? Like that's not common. Not to say that you couldn't do that. But the other thing that's interesting is, so we talked about the variance, and you wonder, depending on the game, you either do or you don't want a lot of modifiers. I mean, sometimes people don't want a game where when you roll the d20, you're having to go up or down between 1 and 5 to 6 points and doing that calculation. It works quite well in certain games, and people want that at times, but sometimes people don't want that. They just want to see the dice, and they actually would rather add and subtract dice or use different dice to see a different result rather than having to do that calculation. So it's almost like you can use the modifier, or you can actually, in some cases, remove the modifier and just choose different dice or numbers of dice to get that variance. So it's kind of interesting in those choices.
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways of dealing with that. Let's say you have, let's talk about my system real quick. If you're at like point blank range, short range, medium range, long range, extreme range, all right. And on a D20 extreme range, you might hit on a 17 or an 18 on a D20. A very small chance you're going to do that. And it's all set. It's like everything is set to a certain value. The only thing that changes is the quality of your troops. So if you have elite troops, it's a +2. Veterans are +1. Regulars straight up. Greens are -1. Let's say conscripts or something might be a -1 or -2. Variable. And that was pretty easy. I just like, okay, I'm at extreme range. I need 17s to hit. Oh, I'm a veteran. All right, so I need 16s. And you will pick up your 10-man squad. You have 10 guys, roll 10 dice, and then just pick out what hits. Right. It's no different than in a lot of other different games. You just have to know if you need to use a modifier or not. Right. Thing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So I kind of thought, I think we touched on some of the main stuff that I was kind of thinking. It's kind of I'll be honest, some of what we do is nostalgia, or even just the feel of games too. Like we've had discussions at times about game components, and dice are a game component. And sometimes when you're just playing games that primarily use D6, and lately, I mean, like I've been playing a lot of Saga lately, and it's just D6. It's D6, and I really have enjoyed it. I've played like 3 games recently, and And same thing like with like 40K and musket tomahawks, like it's D6. But sometimes there's a bit of a charm, like in particular if you started with D&D, like you were talking about, like I did as well. And sometimes it's just fun to actually bring out the polyhedral dice. And Savage Core uses a D10. And so there's a lot of games that that I've been playing recently that have actually elect to use other dice. And I just think it's fun. I mean, I want to play the old AD&D battle systems that uses all the polyhedral dice because it's a TSR game.
Yeah,
you know, and it's based on D&D. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And I think that not only is it fun to just use different dice like in your game, but also for the reasons and some of the ones that you were saying, like changing the order of magnitude of what you're trying to do by grabbing a different dice, I think is a lot of fun. Like instead of just adding numbers, but actually getting to roll a different die and having the result like that is fun.
And that was, if you ever get a chance, I think Star Grunt is still on. Look up Ground Zero Games.
Mm-hmm.
You can. It's like here I got it. You know, it was a PDF.
Okay.
You could just download it for free.
Yep.
If it's still around, I haven't looked for a while. Look up Ground Zero Games Star Grunt.
Okay.
And that's the system I was, one that we used to play a lot of, and it uses a large variance of which die you're going to have due to range or quality of troops and stuff. And it's a very kind of a novel type of system that you don't really see too much. And it actually starts bringing in and makes you start thinking in different ways of how to, you think about how individuals, I'm one of them that will say, how can I maximize my efficiency in most killing power in a game? But when you're using different troops, quality, and range, it changes things out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're sitting there going, okay, how can I do this? And it starts really throwing you a monkey wrench into how the game goes. Right. And to be honest with you, it was like very challenging at times, but very fun.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds awesome. I mean, I also think one thing we didn't get into the scale of the games, but because we've had lots of discussions on that, but I do think probably the more the game is about an individual, like a skirmish where you have a party that's a few 4 or 5, 8 characters, I could see using lots of variability within a die, like to reflect those individuals. Whereas the more it's about armies and units that are more alike, I could see using dice, that are not, that may not in some cases reflect variability. It might, like that's where I think the D6s oftentimes make a lot of sense in some games. Yeah. So,
I think some of it is when it comes to this type of systems, what the individuals that design the game, what they're more exposed to is, let's say you never played D&D and all you ever played were games that had a D6 in it. When you design a game, you're most likely going to put a D6 in it.
Yeah, if that's what you're familiar with.
Yeah, it's a matter of familiarization. Now, if you spend all your formative years playing, like, say, D&D, and you're exposed to tons of different kind of dice, you start thinking in a different way. It's like, how can I use a D12 to make a game? Yeah. Yes, you can. It's like, is it possible to do a D10? Yes, very, very easily. And what really started me along the line, it's like the very first game I ever designed was back in 82, 83, when I finally finished it out mostly, was it was based on a percentage. It was kind of like Rollmaster. Before we started Rollmaster, and everything was using 2D10. And then I realized, why am I trying to roll 2 dice to do something when I could just roll a D20? Because it dawned on me, a D20 is a percentile dice also.
Yeah. And well, it's just out of 100, right? Like, yeah. That way. Yeah, exactly. And it also depends on how much time you have, because if you want to start rolling D100s, you have to spend a lot of time waiting for it to stop and picking it up off the floor.
Yes.
It's basically a ball.
I was like, my son and I were just looking at my box of dice. Where are they at? Oh, where do you put them? Oh, there they are. This is the box of dice here. This was from the May Edition shop class. Back in, let's say, 79.
Yeah.
And I made it. It comes with its own dice tray. So you roll inside here. But it's like we were looking at here's the very first D20 I ever had out of the original D&D box.
Wow.
It's round
smooth.
now.
Yeah, it's smooth.
We rolled it so many times it doesn't have edges anymore.
Hilarious.
Now, it's like if you want to talk about D6, it's a round D6. It's got a little marble in it. So when you roll it, we're stopped rolling.
It's the weight. Yeah, that's awesome. Sweet.
So it's like all kinds of cool stuff that you do when you're, you think about stuff. It was like, to be honest with you, I'm into dice. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's like what I said. I mean, people like that. I mean, a lot of people, you can play with cards like Malifaux. There are other ways to play games, but a lot of people at the end of the day like to roll dice. It's a fun thing, and it's just fun, right? And so, what do you think? We should maybe move on to
our next subject here.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll let you kick this one off here.
So we could talk about it as painting for fun versus painting your armies. I wouldn't actually classify it exactly that way, although that can be a big part of this. Honestly, painting for your armies to wargame can be fun. I mean, like, I primarily paint for my armies and I have fun. Sometimes we all know assembly line painting for big things can get to a point where it's not fun and you want to switch to something else, maybe another army. But also, many of us that are in the miniature gaming hobby that model and do hobbying are also into scale modeling. Some of us are into that. There's a bit of crossover in the hobby. Some of us like to do dioramas. Some of us like to paint character models that might not even be for a force that we're using, but you just like the model. Sometimes people enter painting competitions. You can do that with stuff that you use for your armies. You can do that with something you paint just for a competition. The question or the discussion point is just how often do we spend time thinking about painting something for a reason other than an army that you're putting down? Is it helpful to actually paint other things, to pick something out for that reason? And helpful in the sense of whether it be helpful for your painting skills, helpful in the sense of what do we call it? The whole hobby block, that can sometimes happen, when you or get stuck when you're in the middle of something. There could be a lot of reasons it can be helpful or maybe hurtful too, like in the sense that it might actually, some people might find that as a distraction, like I've got so much to do. I've got, that I want to be just painting for my armies, like for tournaments or for this or that. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm a little bit of everything when it comes to, as you just showed tonight, this guy right here, is that a diorama or is it a game piece?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I did this as a diorama first.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to get used in a game probably, but I made it as a diorama. Just the fact that it was a season, it's Halloween, and I was like, I want to do something totally different from what I was working on, which had been Eldar for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I had fun doing it. And it was just for 100% was pure fun first.
Right.
And if it gets some use in a game, so much the better. And I find myself, there are times when a lot of the stuff I do is just for pure fun or dioramic effect. A lot of the, like this miniature right here, this Morngol that I'm doing here, it's like when I put this on here and I started making the little, base thing here, and my son was like, well, you don't have to do that. Just glue it on there. No, I'm doing a miniature diorama. I'm going to add some more effects to it.
Right.
to make it look better, to try to tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I always look at stuff. Now, if I'm painting, let's see, can you see it? Where's it at? Is it behind my head? There it is, right there.
The horns?
Got horns. I'm thinking. No, it's like it's the burning chariot of Zinch right there.
Okay. Yep.
That's going to just be for an army effect. It's not really. It's going to be the exalted flamer is going to be on a separate base, and it's going to be a herald on a burning chariot. You know, not going to be something really fancy. It's more for game effect. You know, because building a Zinch army for Age of Sigmar really didn't need it for 40K because that doesn't really matter in 40K.
You're just trying to challenge yourself with some rules, like something that'll just kind of get your headspace.
Yeah,
get you in that headspace. Yeah.
So when it comes to painting that thing, it won't take me very long, and I won't put much effort into it.
Yeah.
Which I guess my not so much effort might be some people's total effort. I don't know, but I don't want to spend all day. It's not going to be what you call a golden demon effect. Even though I have some miniatures hidden around back here in different boxes, hidden away that could be probably thrown in for a golden demon. But now when it comes to just throwing stuff down, I have painted. It's like, okay, on Saturday we played a game of 40K, and it's like, all right, we're going to play next Saturday. Bring your, let's say your Imperial Guard army, and I want to play against that. And I was like, okay, I don't have that really painted. All right, so the next week is going to be crush time. And it was the only reason I'm painting that army is just to play with it. It's not because I wanted to paint them for the purpose of making a diorama for fun. It suddenly became a job or a chore. And I think that's a lot of problems. I was watching somebody's video today, and I said, well, I haven't got much painted here in the last couple of months. It's just like I just can't get into it. I'm just not feeling it. It's like, well, were you painting it because you're trying to crush an army out to get it done and just to play with it? Or are you painting for fun? What's the difference?
Yeah.
And that's something you got to ask yourself.
And you can do both for fun, right? Like both, absolutely. I mean, it has to be. I mean, even if you're painting armies for gaming, I mean, hopefully it's fun. I mean, that hopefully you're choosing an army you want to paint. Hopefully you're in a game that kind of has your imagination going, whether it be fictional or historical. Both can have your imagination going, because you can be thinking about what this tank looks like rolling in World War II through fields like in France, and it got your imagination going. I mean, like, it's no difference. Like, it's both using your imagination, right? But I find, that it's helpful for me on a number of levels to just free myself of commitments to paint for gaming at times and just do something for fun or even improvement, like personal improvement. Like, there are times when, let's say I'm doing Bealton Eldar, which would be the case in, like, let's say 2012 through 2013 on the channel. Like, I'm just doing a lot of Bealton Eldar. So like, I'm trying to learn how to paint white, that's for sure. Like, there's certain things I'm trying to do. I'm trying to learn how to highlight up green. There's different things techniques that I'm working on. But you get to a point, and I'm trying to paint gems, learn how to paint gems. Like, there's things that you learn. But then you get to a point where there are certain techniques you're not running into as much. And if you're trying to improve as a painter and trying to really get broad in your skills, fact of the matter is you might be able to find on all their models a way to do a certain technique, but you're not driven to really do certain techniques. One thing would be maybe heavy weathering. If you like your Eldar to be crisp and clean, like, and not heavily weathered like a Space Marine with rust or anything like that, then you're not going to get that as much opportunity to do that. If you or don't want your Eldar to look like Nurgle, then you're not going to get the sort of plague effects of, like, the rotting and all that kind of stuff, or even maybe the same kind of conversions. and that's another whole thing, right? We're just talking about, it's not just painting, but it's also the converting and the sculpting and all of that stuff too. And so I find you can get a lot out of just grabbing one miniature and working on some of those techniques and have some fun with it, get a diversion from what you're doing, and then also try to improve your skills. Because I find that there's always something for me to learn in this hobby. That, like, I can think of a million things that I've not done yet. You know, like, just all I got to do is start looking at different things, and I can see there are things that I've not done, or, you know, that I have opportunity to do things. So another opportunity I had is I won that contest and got that bust of the Roman Legionnaire. And so that was like painting a larger figure that's human, like not just a like giant, but like a human and a larger figure. Just never did it before. And so it was a really good opportunity to try to learn something new with that. And, you know, I've not pulled it out yet because I'm not that far with it, but I was showing you, Rusty, diorama that I'm looking at doing, and I'll either do it for Halloween or I'll do it a little after. But it you know, is like a 40K based diorama, you know, with a demon, and I'm looking at doing some different things on it. And it's just an opportunity to take something that I've read in books, like, you know, like reading the 40K stuff, and inspired me to do this sort of diorama to emulate some of the stuff that I've read in books, and then, you know, just to create a bit of a story, opportunity for conversions and things like that. And so, and the other whole thing is sometimes you might want to change genres altogether. I used to have the Marvel game. I still have it, but it's no longer supported and I don't play it anymore. But I'm always, at any one time, I've got so much Marvel stuff to paint. At any one time, I've got a Marvel blister that I'm looking to do. This one's Spider-Man. I don't know if you can see it there or not, but this one's Spider-Man. And yeah, it's just a little picture. That's the miniature there.
He's
got his picture.
Usual
action. Yeah, I did Doctor Doom not that long ago. I've got a ton of other ones to do, but because I love Marvel, it allows me to take my miniature hobby and paint something up that, even though I'm not gaming with it now, I can paint something that I really enjoy, have a lot of fun with it. And that wouldn't be that much different than little shout out to Mr. BMB, the Brisbane model builder that I oftentimes I subscribe to his channel and comment on his channel. He also subscribes to mine and comments on mine. He's not a gamer at all. And he has bought 40K kits. He's bought all kinds of stuff. Like, he actually painted up an Infinity miniature recently, but he's mostly into the larger scale. But he occasionally will go down and get if he likes the miniature, and paint it up. And he actually painted up Lord of the Rings Ent, and he's just done that recently. And so, yeah, you know, so like somebody that's not into gaming can still appreciate some of our gaming models, just from the sake of painting it up and putting it in a diorama, and get that enjoyment out of creating a scene and doing that. And so I think I've kind of taken a little too much time in my response to this, but I would just say that I think it affords so much opportunity, and so much opportunity for fun and learning, that I think it's really positive overall.
Yeah, if you, I used to be really big into model tanks and aircraft and stuff like that when I was a teenager and into my early 20s, and until I used to build all that stuff. And if you would have seen my bedroom when I was a kid, you would have had all the different, like a B-17 sitting there flying along. And I even got to the point where I put lights and stuff in them.
Yeah.
And then I had like little Mr. Schmidt's 109s, Folkwolfs, you know, coming up behind them, you know, and being escorted by some, like a P-51, or my favorite aircraft is the P-38. And that is, in some ways, totally different from my usual, what I paint is like all the miniatures and stuff like this.
Right.
For gaming. And I do subscribe to a couple other guys on YouTube. They don't game at all. They're just modelers.
Right.
And I enjoy looking at them building stuff and painting it up. And it's like, that's their passion. And I can understand that. But it gives you something totally different. It's like, if you're having problems painting a certain type of miniature, pick up a model kit and then learn how to do all the grime effects and you name it on a weathering on a, let's say, an aircraft or a tank. And it's like when you've seen my different kind of tanks I've been doing for like bolt action, that's where all that came from. Was that I used to do all that just for fun.
Right.
And now it's a game piece, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to town on this. This is, and I get to throw this on a table and shoot something with it too. And so that's something you need to actually think about, is like, you have your hobby, but if you start finding yourself getting into a rut, maybe pick up something totally different that's you're working on something, but it's not game related, that will give you some of those skill sets you might be looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you said earlier, is trying to figure out, how do I paint this color, or how do I do this effect? Because that's one thing I'm always doing. I remember for years, I'd be sitting there delving through and looking at all the white dwarfs.
Mm-hmm.
Back when I used to have this subscription back in the early 90s and through 2000, and which I still have a big box of all those white dwarfs sitting in the other room. And I'd look at it, it's like, how did they do that?
Right.
And it's like, what are they doing here? What did they, how? It's like, you sit there and you're pondering it, because they didn't have any tutorials back then.
Right.
It was like, oh, here's this episode of Heavy Metal, and all they show is pictures. I'm like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did, he's like,
so it's only part of the story. It's not the whole story. Like they don't, like you're not necessarily, some of them, the good ones will actually in the description kind of mention things like below it or something. But yeah, they're really fun. Those old step-by-steps, but then also like when it comes to the world of video, in comparison, like there are some advantages for sure, like in seeing it actually happen and how thin the paint is as it's being put on and things like that.
And that's one thing I learned, is like thinning my paints down a little bit. Is like, one thing I've noticed that they always thin theirs down in the on the palette.
Yeah.
And I'm a watercolor painter too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I watered them down in the pots.
Yeah.
I'll take the pot and I'll put a little water in them and thin them down that way.
Okay. Yep.
And it's like, then I don't have to think about it. It's just, I get them down to the consistency I want, and then and then if they start getting a little thick because they're open to, they do dry out eventually, and I'll just put a little bit of, a little drop or two of water back into it and thin them down a bit. And that's the way I paint. It's like, and there's been times I'll paint come right out of the pot, and then I'll wipe it onto my my paper, because I always have. It's like, I don't have a wet palette; I have a paper palette.
Right. Everybody is different. I know a lot of people swear by the wet palette, and also just from saving paint and things like that. I honestly, I have a wet palette. I don't use it as much as I should probably, but to be honest, I still just use a regular paint tray primarily. But like there's definitely advantages in using the wet palette. I've used it.
Yeah, it's that's one thing I've always learned is through painting watercolors, is that it's different. It's like, if there's a 180, there's a difference between if you're an oil painter or a watercolor painter. It's like night and day, 180 difference. It's like an oil painter can cover up mistakes. Like, oh, got that, and just take a little bit more oil paint and you just cover it up and you're good.
Yeah.
A watercolor painter, you have to determine where all your lights are and all your darks are going to be. And you have to determine in advance where that's going to be, and you lay it out. It's like that's one thing I always have a problem with sometimes, is like, I look at a miniature and go, where do I start? And I'll drive myself nuts sometimes just trying to figure out how to attack it and because I'm always thinking, do I lay this color down here, this color this way, and then I'll just like this way? And I'll start drive myself crazy, because that's the watercolor painter in me that's coming out. And it's like, okay, step back. It's not that hard. I can cover up a mistake if I have to.
Right. Well, it's interesting. And you're just getting back to kind of, it's sort of an interesting tangent because it actually just shows how if you were a miniature painter and like how doing something like watercolor might help you if working out a plan in the very beginning is something that you struggle with or you're not forced to do as much, but you want to work on that, then maybe doing another kind of painting, like you said, can actually maybe work on different skills, you know, like that are just completely different, you know.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah.
And I'd say one thing I learned before I ever started painting miniatures was that as a watercolor painter, I learned blending.
Mm-hmm.
How colors will blend together and create different colors of the spectrum.
Right.
It's just by it's like you can take a color here, put a line, a little bit of color here, a little bit of color there, and then take a little splash of water in between them, and they just blend together onto paper.
Yeah.
And it's like the first time it's like do what? And then you do it, and you try it. Oh, okay, that's cool. And you start learning how to do that on a miniature. Is like wet painting. It's like taking a color here, put a little bit on your miniature over here and a little bit here, and then you just take a little bit and just kind of blend them together, and they just merge together on your miniature. And then it's like if you're like a big painter, like say Zinch or something like that, where you want the colors to come together like a wave of color. That's one way to do it.
That's not a mistake. That's a blend.
Yes.
That's not painting outside the lines. That's a blend.
Like a good blended scotch.
That's right. Well, I think that was a interesting chat. Yeah, I think that was a kind of a good talk, you know, just in the sense of, you know, like we oftentimes, some people come to painting through wanting to game. Like that's like the idea is like you actually see people playing a game, you get interested in it. You determine like, do I pay somebody to paint or do I try to do this? And the whole painting is about the game. Other folks might actually paint miniatures because they just enjoy painting miniatures, and they may eventually try a game that it's for, but may never. But you know, like the painting is a completely separate but also kind of tangential thing to what it's for. And depending on what your purpose is, you may not even think about ever painting something if it wasn't something you needed. I have a little inside joke with one of my gaming buddies because it's not on the table now, but for the longest time I had my D&D Purple Worm. It's the collectible miniature on my desk. And I only painted that. I was going to use it in some of the Wrath of a Charlatan, the board games, but I think I had to find a card for it. Like it wasn't part of the game, but I really bought it because I loved it. I thought the miniature looked great, reminded me of D&D, and I just wanted to paint it. Like that, just wanted to paint it. And then I used it as a way to try to vary blues and purple, despite the fact that I'm doing blues and purple for my Eldar, my Space Elves right now. It was very much about dark purples and blues and blending them and really trying to do that well for the Purple Worm. And so I loved it. And my friend had said, well, yeah, but you know, he would say something to it because he's very much a gamer, and he's thinking like, I try to buy stuff that I'm going to use, you know, and so we kind of go back and forth on that a little bit because we'll joke around and say, well, like if he sees something that he really likes, he might say, well, this is kind of like a Purple Worm.
Yeah.
You know, he gets it, but he's definitely more about buying for the purposes of using in a game, where for me, I'm kind of getting to the point more and more over time that I don't really care whether I use in a game or not. Like, granted, we have budgets, right? And we want to be able to have gaming budgets. And so some of it is to game, but I can buy something just because I really like it, you know, just to paint it.
Yeah, I would say on that tangent, at the point now, it's like I've been looking at, let's say, 40K, and how every time I've watched a game have knights in it, you know, Imperial Knights, and they're always getting stomped and wiped off the table by turn 2 or 3. It's like knights suck now, I guess.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, that's like I have yet to see a game where knights have lasted more than 3 turns. They're just they're shot off the table. You know, they're just
dreadnoughts are just beating up knights left and right.
But I still I still look at the Forge world, and it's like I look at the new ones that they've come out, and obviously Games Workshop had their new plastic ones. And I look at those and go, how much time would I take to have to save up to buy another one of those?
Yeah.
Just to paint.
Yeah, yeah.
Just to add to my collection. And I always keep telling my wife is that, we had our, the state fair was here a couple months ago. I guess it's almost 2 months ago now. And we were walking around, and they have this, or the Amish have this one booth that the Amish come in, and they have all the different furniture, and they had these big, beautiful display cases, like nooks, and for only $2,000, this could be yours. And I was looking at that, and I was like, how many miniatures can I put in there? And I was talking to my wife and looking at that, and she was like, it's $2,000. Like, so what you're saying is I can either buy a Warlord Titan or a Nook.
I think I know what the answer is. Exactly.
So yeah, it's one of those things where you just kind of look at it and go, well, do I buy something for the hobby just to paint for the sake of painting it and enjoying it? Or are you going to buy it because you need it in a game?
Osterwolf says hello. He jumped in.
Oh, we got somebody come in?
Yeah, Osterwolf. He says
okay.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Osterwolf.
Yay. I kept checking back and forth every once in a while, and we didn't have anybody check in yet, so that's why I didn't say anything. But it's one of those things where sometimes you just have to buy something for the sake of painting it.
Yeah.
And it's like I keep showing this little guy off because British Legion, I don't know if you'll see this, but I like this little guy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I have him on display all the time because he's kind of like inspirational. He just sits there and stares. And the whole purpose is like he had no purpose in the game, but I got that thing, and I was like, I'm gonna paint that because that's gonna look cool.
Exactly.
And I come to find out when I was painting it, it's like, oh, it doesn't have a nose, so I had to actually use shading.
You didn't just make a Charlie Brown marker, or whatever. Well, and it's funny because you remember that little guy that I have that's the sort of gnome smoking the pipe where I sculpted the smoke, and he's sitting on the die. Not the dice, but the die. I have him in my tower that I made, the stone tower that I use for Saga and for fantasy games. He's just in my display cabinet. He's just chilling out in the top of the tower in my display cabinet. But every time I go by, I see him in the smoke rising and smoking his pipe in there, and I think it's awesome. It's fun to have those little things. Whether you just have it sitting on your shelf or you use it as a learning process or whatever. But I think it's mostly positive. Some people might see, you could view it as a distraction too, and also you could say that within your armies or within your game, let's say you play something like Warhammer Fantasy Battles, that there's enough variety that you can do both. You can actually paint for your armies and get a good amount of variety. But I do find that doing dioramas and creating a scene or doing like things that are just completely out of the scope of what you're doing can be fun. Just for the sake of doing that too.
Yeah, I don't know if I can dig this thing out. Gotta disconnect myself first.
No worries. Dan Booman's joined us as well, and then also the Internet Hobbyist has also joined us. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Yeah, it's one of those things where every once in a while you have to paint something. It's a game piece, but it's never been on the table.
Okay. It's all wrapped in bubble wrap. This is going to be good.
Yeah. There we go.
I am trying to get my head around that. It looks like from here, it looks very steampunk. It's not organic, right? It looks like it's mimicking something organic, but it's metal.
It's metal. It's Cricks.
Oh, so this is War Machine.
War Machine. It's a War Machine. And you see there's a little Menoff Jack sitting right there. That's all tore up and shot to hell.
Yeah.
And I did that on purpose. I was like, you know what? My friend plays Menoff. And I got that Menoff miniature and I filled it full of holes.
That's right.
And I put it at the bottom just as a diorama. And it's like, if it ever went on the table, and it's like, it's already in your head, pal.
Because that's the way you roll. That reminds me of when Edic Beer had the 2 Blood Angels that were blown apart in the land speeder.
Yes.
It's funny.
So, it's one of those things where it's not necessarily something I got to play with, but I seen the miniature and it was like, I need to have that just to paint it, just for the sake of putting it on a display sometime in the future.
Yeah.
And then I got this one, this little guy.
Oh, nice.
So this one here, my friend also plays. See, there's Cador.
There's a reason.
It's a Cador Man of War. And you can see he's stepping on it.
Yeah, yeah.
He's like,
sweet.
So sometimes you just have to do stuff for psychological warfare.
That's right. But even there, like, by doing your opponent's army and painting something up, you're painting a different color scheme too, right? It's just great, like to be able to just do different stuff.
And what I liked about that is that, everything on this miniature here was blue. There's blue and white, so that you have that just contrast of blue and white.
Yep.
But by putting a little bit of red color in there like that, it just gives it something to pop and pull your eyes elsewhere, and it shows action.
Yeah, exactly. Well, great. Yeah, and I think we've kind of talked that one up and down now. So yeah, that was good.
Yeah, that was a pretty decent conversation there. But when it comes to just in closing, if you find yourself ever in a point where you're just like, I don't know what to paint anymore, it's like, I'm not feeling it, take a 180, go to someplace like a hobby shop or something else where you build model cars or something like that. Just try something different and put something else together that's not related to your hobby, and kind of try to use your hobby skills and learn something different.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you could even make the argument that doing something for somebody else's army, a friend or something, could be fun.
Yeah.
Like you can just paint something different.
I used to get roped into that because every time I won, my one friend would say, all right, you beat me. You waffle stomped me. Now you got to paint one of my miniatures. That's a price.
There you go.
Beating me. You have to paint something of mine. I was like, okay. And I don't want you painting any of my miniatures, so I guess I have to keep winning.
That's horrible. Oh, gosh. All right. Well, that was a good one. I'm doing good, Internet.
So
thing
in the chat. Okay.
Yeah. Just Internet Hobbies is saying hello, and that he enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for everyone for joining. I think we're kind of hitting the end of this show. I particularly enjoyed. I enjoyed both of those, but I thought the dice one was quite interesting too. That was a little bit of a longer one today, but I thought that was actually kind of interesting. And so,
yeah, with that subject, I could just wax lyrical for a long time.
That's right.
So you had to, I seen this giant hook come out and go. Oh.
I never do that. All right. Well, thanks for everybody for showing up, and for everyone that's watching this after it's live. Thanks for stopping by. And next, it'll be 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, it will be back over on Heresy Productions. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah. All right, buddy. It was a good conversation. If you have any suggestions down below, and when this goes up live, probably in an hour. So if next couple of days, when you made it to this far, if you have any suggestions or conversations that you want to have in the future, maybe ask and we can get around to them. It's going to be a long season, don't you think? Oh, and if anybody wants to come on and just join us for an episode, we'll be happy to have you on. If you want to talk gaming and everything, we can do that.
Absolutely.
All right. Just contact Palmer or I, and we can get that done too. All right, everybody. Thanks for stopping by and watching the video, and we'll see you next time.
See you, everybody.